It is week 7, and that gives me a chance to use one of my favorite words, which I rarely get to use, and that is penultimate. Penultimate means next to the last. The ultimate is the height or the last, and penultimate is the next to the last. So I get to use that word, and that always makes me happy, kind of. This week is a bit different than previous weeks. You really have only one assignment, and that is to get your to get your final draft, not your rough draft, finished and submitted. There is a discussion, but it is a non-graded discussion, and it is for posting any problems or even successes that you might be experiencing to get feedback. And I will comment on your post as they are made. And I encourage every student to read the post. And even if you're not experiencing problems, and even if you decide not to post, give comments to your peers. The more feedback, the better. And even though I am the instructor, and even though I have been teaching composition and literature for about, 16 and a half, 17 years now, different perspectives are good. And one of you might have a perspective different from mine that will be just as valid and perhaps help one of your classmates, one of your peers, see something in a different way. Now, we're not analyzing anything this week except what you were analyzing in your final paper. So I want to talk a bit about revising. You had your outline, which was basically a rough draft, graded and returned to you with comments. Please pay attention to my comments, because every single comment I made was aimed at helping you successfully revise your outline. I keep wanting to say a rough draft. Technically, it was an outline, but basically the same thing. You need to edit and you need to revise. Now, there's a difference between editing and revising. Editing is going through and finding the grammatical errors, the typos, the misspelled words, checking for clear syntax. And syntax is just the order of words in a sentence, and other problems that might exist with clarity. Revising is changing, reading, and making sure that your analysis is correct and that everything you say is spot on. Now, Word will help you with the editing. Pay attention to the green squiggly underlines and the red squiggly underlines, and I'm going to caution you, if you don't already know, those lines aren't always correct. But click on them to see what words suggest that need to be changed, because sometimes, often, it is right. I remember one time when I was editing a paper that I was writing for my master's degree, and it told me that forebears wasn't a word. Yes, it is. So again, that's not always, the word grammar check and spell check is not always correct, but it is a lot of the time. So pay attention to those. I suggest that when you are revising your work, you get your final draft done, read it aloud. And I always suggest this to any student, to anybody, and I do it when revising, because reading aloud will help you catch areas, especially areas that are unclear, because we hear them rather than just seeing it. When we read, and some to a degree when we listen, but when we read our work, we scan. We scan when we read all the time. It's the reason why we don't read like first graders. A dog went. Because we don't have to sound out each one of those words in our mind. But when we read our work and we scan it, the mind fills in. The mind sees what it wants to see, and sometimes words can be missing. Sometimes it might not be clear, but you know what you mean. But because you know what you mean doesn't mean that other people will understand. When I wrote my thesis, my master's thesis was 110 pages long. I had 3 people on my master's committee who read it, and then I had another person in the I can't even think, the graduate program, the graduate review program, who read it. These people all had PhDs in English and in writing, and they missed and I missed a typo in one of my quotes. It was like between the difference between as and at. And none of us caught it. I caught it when I got the bound thesis back, but it was a little bit too late then. So even people who know the rules make errors. I do all the time, but I try to catch them in the editing and the revision. If you can, get your your final draft finished, and at that point it's still a rough draft, get it finished, put it away for a couple of days, for as long as you can, and then take it out and read it, and that will also help you catch errors in mechanical errors and errors in clarity and perhaps some areas that are clear, but they aren't well supported. Support what you say. Explain what you say. Make sure that it is clear and supported. Don't assume that your readers are going to understand your points if they're not explained well enough or supported with evidence from the work. What else do I want to tell you about editing and revising? MLA format. Whenever you use information from a source, cite it. You must have a works cited page, and a lot of you have been using the outdated format for the works cited page. Review the latest format. Use OWL and check those out, and make sure that that format is updated. Some of you are English majors and you are going to go on and take other literature classes and write other literature papers. You need to know the format. Others of you might never take another literature class, might never take another writing class, but you are still going to have to write for other classes. And some of those you will be using APA. If you are in the sciences especially, and I know it's difficult to go between MLA and APA, but hey, I do it when I grade because I have classes that use both. But keep in mind, MLA was updated last year, and check out those updated ways of not citing, but in the works cited page. The citation stayed the same. Those are just some aspects that I can recommend to you when you are working on the rough draft. And some of you will call upon family members and friends to read your work for you. That's great. But keep in mind, unless your mother or your father or your best friend or your spouse or your partner has a degree in writing, that doesn't mean that their feedback is going to be extremely accurate. And if you have your grandma read your paper, unless your grandma's like me, if you have your grandma read your paper, she's going to tell you that it is just wonderful. So beware the feedback that you get from people who are not experts. Should you not do that? Oh, no, you should do that, because they can help you find those types of errors. I'm going to stop babbling now. Get your final drafts in on time. This is the next to the last week of class, and next week we will have a discussion. That's a little bit of foreshadowing for next week. I got to use a literary term in real life. That's a little bit of foreshadowing for next week. And folks, we're nearly there. So, edit, revise, check for accuracy, check for clarity, and submit it.